You're listening to the NABS Now podcast, brought to you by the National Association of Blind Students, a proud division of the National Federation of the Blind.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the NABS Now podcast. I'm your host Nina, and today we're going to be talking all about building your resume. Resumes are super important for a variety of reasons, which we'll get into shortly, but there are some misconceptions surrounding how to create a good resume, how to update it, and everything in between. So keep listening if you want to figure out how to wow an employer with your resume.
Hi, I'm Dick Davis. I'm the chairperson of the National Federation of the Blind Employment Committee. I've been the chairperson since 2011, which is now 10 years, Done that. It's quite a long time. And before that, I was on the Employment Committee as a member. In the Employment Committee, our goal is to find blind people jobs. Our initial goal was to find blind people jobs in the field of rehabilitation of blind people, but we expanded that significantly, and now we work with small businesses, major corporations, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that we believe very strongly is, as part of the National Federation of the Blind, we believe very strongly that blind people have the ability and wherewithal to get their own jobs, number one. And then the second thing we believe is that blind people are interesting and unique and a real resource. A lot of people think of blind people as kind of being factory seconds. We don't think that. Human beings are never factory seconds. To the extent that we all deal with challenges, to the extent that we all face adversity, etc., that makes us more knowledgeable, more strong, more adaptive, and so on and so forth. And so I can't think personally of any group of people who are stronger and more adaptive and more creative than blind people, because we're faced with a world in which basically that's made for the sighted. And, so any blind person is going to have to learn, creative talents to manage to navigate that particular world. And so that carries on into employment, and the competitive edge of blind persons is that in a world in which it seems like more and more young people are getting babied, by their parents. We have a group of people here who, some of whom, may have been babied by their parents, but as a general rule, most of whom have been able to get to a point where they're actually highly competitive people. Being told no has a tendency, to either make people give up or make people move forward. And so we believe very strongly that the people that we offer to employers are the best employers that employers can hire. And so that's the good news. The second piece of good news about this market is it is becoming a job seekers market. And so if those of you who are listening play your cards right, you have a better chance of getting a job than people did 5 or 10 years ago. And I think that situation is going to continue for many years to come. I think we're in a sweet spot right now, and it's not perfect. Nothing's going to be perfect, but it is a good spot to be in. So you have some questions, Nina?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually start just by asking you more of a blanket question. I know today a lot of applications are done online, and sometimes a resume might even be optional. So why is a resume important? Why is it important to have one in the grand scheme of job applications?
A resume is important because a resume describes what you have to offer to an employer. The employer wants to know what you can do for him or her. And your resume offers that. It's in effect like walking in a store. This may be Nina's store, for example, and you see all the products, arranged in hopefully a logical fashion, so you can go shopping, so, in effect, the resume is an invitation to go shopping in your store. There's a number of other analogies I could use, but I think that's a good analogy because if you want to be successful in your store, you set your store up so that maybe you rotate the products periodically, but your goal is to make it so that every person who walks into your store says, "Wow, hey, I want one of those," or I need this, or I need that, or I need the other. And so that's what your resume does. It is, in effect, your inventory. It's what you're offering the employer for sale. And the employer is your customer, and the employer is going to buy you with actual money and hopefully, give you an opportunity, not only to make money, but to have, make a rewarding contribution to that employer and to the larger society. You asked a similar question about cover letters, which we'll get into later. But your cover letter is important because that's your sales pitch. If you just walk into a store, unfortunately, there's stores like this, by the way. You walk into a store and there's nobody there to wait on you. You're just sort of wandering around thinking, well, I wonder where the socks are located, or I wonder where the camping gear is, or whatever, is in the store. It's helpful to have somebody come up and say, "Hi, can I help you?" And hopefully that salesperson is somebody who knows about the products in the store and asks you a few questions so that you can tell them the answers that, and they can help you locate what you want. And your cover letter is your sales pitch that talks about what you offer the employer and why the employer would find you to be a good person to hire, and hopefully too why an employer would find that you are the best person to hire for that particular job. So that's the importance of both of those.
Great. And would you be able to talk about a few basic guidelines that someone should keep in mind when they're first creating their resume or updating it?
Sure. I think that, well, number one, you need more than one resume. A lot of people have the mistake that if they just write a terrific world-stopping kind of resume, then people are going to look at it and say, "Wow, this is just wonderful. I could hire this person," etc. That's not real-world thinking. You cannot write a generic resume that is going to appeal to everybody in the world. You need to customize your resume to meet the needs of specific employers. And we're going to discuss that a little bit later, but let me say you need more than one resume. So your first resume is the great resume. It's the resume that you would send to the world to show what a great person you are. That is a generic resume. And if you're a college student, which I'm sure most of you guys are, who are listening to this cast, you know how to do research, and you know how to do research papers. And sometimes, hopefully anyway, they're persuasive research papers. So this is the most important research paper you will ever write in your life, because if you write other research papers, you're going to get a grade out of it. If you write this research paper well, you're going to get a job and money out of it. It's a lot higher stakes kind of research paper. And a lot of people just want to rush through a resume. It's like, oh, I'll get it out so I can start applying for jobs. No. That's turning it around. It's like going out for a date and not dressing completely, like having your socks missing or whatever, not wearing a shirt, whatever. You don't want to do that. You want to be very, very careful. You want to make sure everything is in its place. So you're going to write a generic resume with everything in it that you think you might be able to offer to an employer. And not only that, but I recommend very strongly that you show that resume. Well, you can do it two ways. You can show the resume to people who know you, and ask them to suggest things to add to it, or you can just go around to those individuals who know you, very well, and say, "Hey, you know me pretty well. What kind of skills and what kind of characteristics do you think I could offer an employer?" And you just simply make that part of your research. And you want to avoid people who tell you generic things to put in a resume, because you're not a generic person. You need to put in things that are relevant to you. I knew a guy who put in his resume that he was punctual, and I said to him, "You're not in the least bit punctual." He said, "Well, but my friend told me that employers like to read that you're punctual." I said, "That's a lie. You can't put in something that's a lie. Put in something that's true. Put in that you learned computer programming on your own. That's a strength, and it's a truthful strength. But don't tell somebody that you're on time when in fact you probably going to show up 5 or 10 minutes late every day. That type of thing. So you want to make sure it's truthful. So when you've created this giant resume of your dreams, which can go as many pages as you want, then you can take that information and you can turn that into a resume that is focused on the kind of job you're looking for. That's less generic, but it's still rather generic. So for instance, if you were applying for a career in social work, then you want to look through your generic resume and pick out all the stuff that's relevant to a career in social work, and the fact that you spent the summer mowing lawns and your uncle's landscaping company is probably not going to be relevant to that, but the fact that you took the principles of social work and you had a social work practicum, say in a rehabilitation facility, that's going to be far more relevant. So you're going to weed through the resume, the generic resume, and pick out the stuff that's relevant to the career for which you are applying. And if you're looking for more than one potential career or job, difference between a job and a career is basically how much education they require and how much time you want to spend at it. And so it's fine to have a job. I think people learn a lot from jobs. But ultimately, if you want to hunker down and do something for the rest of your life, you probably want to pick a career, because jobs come and go. So anyway, if you say, okay, well, I'm interested also in perhaps working in drug rehab with my social work degree, then you would want to write a separate resume for drug rehab counseling and so on and so forth. So let's say you've got those two things done. You've got your generic resume to which you're going to continue adding things all your life because it's your master resume. And you may use the generic resume. For instance, if somebody says to you, "I want to see all of your qualifications possible," let's say you were in the grad school or something like that, you may want to send out the generic resume. But generally, we don't send out our generic resume. We use that as kind of our master file to create our resume. So then you create these. So those are your basic guidelines, I say you would use. And of course, I published in the Braille Monitor in the May 2021 issue a kind of a reasonably readable, hopefully, article on how to write a resume. And hope you look at it. But you can look at all kinds of other resources. There's tons of resources out there. There are simple things that you need to know, like begin all of your sentences with a verb rather than the first person singular. Like keep eye out. Most of the time, you can You can put some stuff in the beginning, like if you have a personal statement, you can use your first person singular in that. You certainly should use your first person singular, in your cover letter and so on and so forth. So there's rules like that. As a general rule, if you're writing a resume, I'd keep it to 2 pages, 1 to 2 pages, unless you're writing one for, excuse me, unless you're writing one for the federal government, in which case they have set rules. The Office of Personnel Management has set rules on how to write a federal resume. It's pretty much generic, like your generic resume. And an academic resume wants to know all of the presentations you've made, and the classes you've taken, and what you helped in research projects, and so on and so forth. So those are 2 resumes in which you can go on forever. One of the people I worked with had a 17-page academic resume, and that's not unusual. The difference, of course, is that the feds and academia love to read stuff, and they're going to read every single word of your resume. But your average hiring person is going to want 1 to 2 pages. Make sure that you don't print your resume, your 2-page resume, on one piece of paper, because when somebody copies it, they may not copy the second part. The second thing in it is, if you use a 2-page resume, which you're of course going to print on 2 separate pieces of paper, make sure you put your name and just enough stuff up at the top of it, so that if the 2 pieces of paper get separated, they can be put together by somebody. So your second page should at least say Nina Marranca resume, or something along those lines. So I know this sounds really stupid, but
I've forgotten to do that. It makes a difference because people unstaple stuff all the time.
Yeah, they do.
If it's a hard copy.
Yeah, you have to assume that if a person can be stupid about something, that they will take advantage of that opportunity, unfortunately. So you want to make your whole presentation error-free. I would say having I, me, and so on and so forth comes across as being a bit self-centered. So you want to try to avoid that. You want to start your sentences with a verb. You don't want to use weak verbs, like, for instance, helping or participated in or stuff like that. That is not very strong. You want to come up, and here's the balance. You don't lie in a resume. People will fire you for lying in a resume. They actually will do that, because if you look at it that way, if they can't trust you to be honest in something like that, what can they trust you for? And why should they trust you? So in the resume, we have to balance, using the strongest verbs that we can, most dynamic verbs. So use dynamic verbs. Don't use wimpy verbs, but use honest, dynamic verbs. And so, if you participated as a as a member of a team that did a project, you can say integral part of a team that designed new employment standards for this job, or served as secretary on committee that did this and that and the other, and wrote up a comprehensive report. You basically use dynamic verbs, and there are plenty of articles on power language and those kinds of things. I would say don't be lazy. Don't be lazy, and don't assume that the employer is going to sort through a bunch of stuff and pick out why they should hire you. They don't have time to do that. They're going to look at your resume, and they're going to read the first half of the first piece of paper. And if what you have in that first half of that first piece of paper doesn't say to them, hire me, I have what you want, then you're not going to get hired. I think another mistake that people make is they don't customize the resume to meet the needs of the employer. They're thinking in terms of themselves and not the needs of the employer. The employer, it's not the employer's responsibility, to sort through your stuff and figure out, why they should hire you. It's your responsibility to make it really easy to interview you and hire you. And I think those are some of the real common mistakes that people can make in a resume. I think you want to tone down blindness in a resume. Instead of putting in National Federation of Blind, you can put in NFB. Instead of Ohio School for Blind, you can put in OSB or something like that. I'm not saying be deceptive, but I'm saying, don't have your resume scream out the fact that you're blind, because most people who are reading resumes will not, or screening resumes, because you may not have even gotten somebody who has the power to hire. Most people who are screening resumes are probably going to screen out blind people because, they at that particular point, they're thinking of what their boss will think of them if they give them the resume of a blind person. People with disabilities, then they're probably going to screen. So just tone that stuff down. And I would say that the one thing that people never do is they never explain what they accomplished in the job. A lot of times people will just pay, if they've been in a job, they'll copy and paste their job description into the resume. Don't do that. It looks lazy to an employer, and it is lazy. The employer wants to know what you did in the job, not what your job responsibilities are. So think in terms of outcomes. A headhunter, a person who's looking for people to hire for employers, once told me they want to know what you accomplished. So make sure that when you put anything in your resume, you indicate what you accomplished. So for instance, you went and got a 4-year degree in political science, which is something, by the way, I don't recommend. So many of those people have trouble finding jobs, but let's say you did, and let's say that you worked in a congressman's office, helping them resolve customer complaints, and you developed an entirely new recording system for processing customer complaints. Well, you won't put that in because that's important. It's something that you accomplished. It means you didn't just sit there and have your wheels go around, but you actually accomplished things. So look in terms of accomplishments. Also, a lot of people who have liberal arts degrees will tell me, I have no idea what skills I have. Well, why did you go through 4 years of college, in a program that didn't give you any skills? Why'd you waste your money and time doing that? And of course, the real answer is, of course you learned something. What did you learn? Did you learn how to do research? Did you learn, something about the nature of human beings? What did you learn? And if you can't answer that, then I want you to go around to your college professors and say, what marketable job skills are you teaching me in this class? And that may throw some of them, because a lot of them are just kind of used to doing their thing. But they probably, after thinking about it, if they're good, and most of these people are, they will be able to come up with things. Well, I taught you to do this, or I taught you to do that, and so forth. So if you have gone through a liberal arts program, you want to look at what things not only did you accomplish, but also what things did you learn? What did you come out, being able to do, better as a result of that? And if you didn't get anything out of college, then heavens, why did you spend all that time and money in the first place? So I guess that's probably things not to do.
Okay, great. I think that gives a really good starting point, whether you have a new resume or you're revising. And speaking of revising, our next question is, how can you tell if your resume is a good fit for a job you're applying?
Well, that's actually an easy question to answer.
We like those.
It's really easy. Okay, I'm going to teach you a little secret here. And it's going to sound almost like an insult to an intelligent person. But basically, whether your resume is screened by a person or a machine, neither one of those is going to be all that intelligent. And I don't mean that to be disparaging on the people part. I don't mind being disparaging about machines because they don't have feelings anyway. First thing you should do when applying for any job is you should look at the position description. There are two things. There's the job posting, which is essentially an ad for the job, and there's the position description, which generally is longer than the job posting. You can call up the place that you're applying for, or maybe do a little internet work, too, especially if you're dealing with an organization that has files for these things, which a lot of them, the bigger ones, do. Matter of fact, just kind of either download it or copy and paste it into a file or whatever. Because what you want in that is not only the content, but you also want the words. And so then you take that and you compare your resume, put them side by side, on a computer screen, and you compare your resume with the job description, or if you can't get it, at least the job posting, and you make your resume look like the job posting. You plagiarize. Sorry to say that, because I know in university setting that's a major sin, but it isn't in looking for a job. You plagiarize. You take their words and you put their words into your resume. Now, going back to what I said earlier, don't lie. Don't plagiarize something and then have it turn out wrong. But take their words and put them in your resume. And to the extent that you can, you make your resume look as much as possible like their job description, and you send it in. And what the screening algorithm is going to do is it's going to, the dumber ones look for keyword matches. And so they're going to say, oh yeah, Nina's resume has, a high percentage, an 80% correspondence in terms of keywords, so Nina gets screened in. But Sally, on the other hand, she has a 20% correspondence, so Sally gets screened out. I know this sounds incredibly insulting, but that it's the system, and most employers will actually teach you how to game the system. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where gaming the system is essential. So to the extent that you can make your resume match the job description, you should be in. Now, let's say you can't make it match. Let's say the job description requires things that your resume doesn't happen to have in it. Well, probably then you're going to be screened out, unless you can find some magic to do with your resume. This thing, I think, Nina, is going to change in the next few years, because it's based on what I call the post-Ronald Reagan era, in which lots and lots, anytime an employer had a job, they might get 30, 40, 200, applications or resumes for it. We don't have that today. We have a time when, they actually have to work once again to get qualified people. And so I suspect some of those systems are going to fall by the wayside. But until they do, you just want to compare the two things and make your resume match the job description. And to the extent that you can do that, you're in.
Perfect. And we're actually to our last question. You already talked about why it's important to have a cover letter, but do you have any quick tips to get started on writing one?
Well, let me explain what's in a cover letter. Your cover letter needs to state what job you're applying for. It needs to maybe include just a sentence saying how you learned of the job vacancy, whether it's on the internet, whether you were looking for, whether it came to your college placement office, whether or not a friend referred you. The latter one is very important, because these days they are paying people bounties, up to like $2,000 for bringing in new employees. So if your friend who works in a place told you about a job vacancy, you sure want to put her name in there, so she gets the $2,000 bounty. Likewise, if you bring somebody in. So you want to do that, and then you want to explain why you think that your qualifications as outlined in the attached resume make you a really good person for the job. And you can take a little time to do that. I would say good cover letter is probably a couple pages, 1 page at least. And then at the end of that, why you think you would qualify really well for the job. That's your argument part, of course. Then you want to ask for an interview. And you want to come right out and say, I'd like to. You can do it in several ways. I mean, I'm a great fan of not being too formal. If I were writing a resume for myself, I'd say, can we set up a time for me to come down and talk about how I could, help you guys out, with the skills that I have and the experience. You can be a little more formal and say, can I appreciate the opportunity to interview for the position with you. You can put something like that, but you want to, in effect, ask them for an interview. And then at the end, one of the things I like to do personally is you put in a sentence that says, after a couple of weeks, we want to say something like, if you want to set up an interview or a time for me to talk to you, you can contact me at such and so. And that always should be your cell phone or some way that they can very easily get a hold of you. And then you want to say, I'm going to give you a call in 2 weeks to make sure you get your resume and perhaps talk about get my cover letter and resume and perhaps talk about setting up an interview at that time. So in effect, you want to tell them, you ain't getting away from me. I got you. I'm gonna chase you down and make sure you've got my information. But don't be surprised if after 2 weeks have passed, they still haven't read it. I mean, a lot of times they'll get faster, as time goes on. But they realize that sitting around for 2 weeks is going to lose them people. They'll start making immediate call-ins for interviews, but they're still in a point of time where they might sit around for a couple of weeks and just collect the resumes. Not something I would recommend. But you want to in effect put them on the spot. Let them know that you're going to be following up on that. Let me go back to the resume if I can just for a minute, because I forgot something that's very important. On the resume, either in the resume itself, which I recommend, or in a separate piece of paper, which is okay too, I want you to include 3 references. Ideal reference is an employer reference, somebody you work for who knows you work. The second most important reference is somebody that has taught you, a college professor and so on and so forth. Third level reference is that somebody who is important and who knows you. Your mom and dad are definitely out. Your friends are definitely out. A person that you worked with who knows your work well is a good choice. You want to put in that person's name, their relationship or association with you. You want to put in their phone number, and you want to put in their email. A lot of people will advise you put something on the bottom of the resume saying references available upon request. But once again, if a lot of times employers want to check references before they talk to a person, and so make it easy for them to do that. Don't make them beg you for references, because they may just hire somebody already put the references on. So that's one thing. Second thing is make sure that your LinkedIn site and your Facebook site are not too funky. Facebook is, I think, less of a problem. I think any employer who goes looking at Facebook needs to understand that Facebook is not for employment purposes, but LinkedIn is definitely for employment purposes. And you want to use LinkedIn as a professional site. And if you have your own website, sometimes you might want to put that on your resume also. Some people do have their own websites, but if you have a LinkedIn site, then you want to put some stuff on it. You want to put in stuff that you've written that may be of interest to you. May want to put in things that you've done and so on and so forth. So if that employer goes on LinkedIn and looks you up on LinkedIn, they can actually see more about you. And it doesn't hurt when you come into a resume to bring samples of your writing, samples of your work. It always helps to get letters of reference. Ask people for letters of reference, because most people write glowing letters of reference, and sometimes employers will accept that. Also, just to be a little cynical on it, it keeps people from bushwhacking you. In other words, if they write something nice about you, they won't say something bad about you the phone. So that's kind of really important also to maybe put together a portfolio, not to send the employer, but to bring to the interview with you. But interviews are a different topic. We're talking about resumes today, and I think that's pretty much what I have to offer, unless you have more questions.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much. You gave us a lot of insights, and you broke it down really nicely, because I know it can be overwhelming for both to explain and to kind of ingest it. So I really appreciate it.
Well, let me leave one other suggestion, and that is, you may run into many different people who claim that their job-seeking advice is the best. So, a couple principles here. Number one, don't take job-seeking advice from somebody who doesn't have a job. Only take job-seeking advice to somebody who's working happily. That's number one. Number two, realize that there's many different opinions about the best way to get a job, and so pick and choose. Be an informed consumer. If what I've told you today doesn't work for you, well, fine. Find something that you think works for you. I have about 45 years of experience finding blind people jobs, but I'll be the first one to claim that I'm not perfect and I don't know exactly what will work, best for everybody. People are so individual, and remember to put the work into it. For heaven's sakes, a lot of people don't put as much work into writing a resume that's going to get a job than they would in the average term paper, and it's just terrible. I mean, put time and effort into it, and that will show. And it is okay to get somebody to write a resume for you, but you want to make sure that it has a lot of you in it, so that so it doesn't look like it came out of a resume mill, because that works against you. Yes, those are all the things I can think of at the last moment.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening, and a huge thank you to our special guest, Richard Davis. You gave us a ton of great insights, and I hope that all of you found this episode as helpful and enlightening as I did. Stay tuned to see what we'll cover next.